4 Chinese AI labs just dropped frontier coding models in 12 days. Every single one competes with or beats GPT-5. And they did it with chips the United States tried to ban. GLM 5.1, MiniMax M2.7, Kimi K2.6, DeepSeek V4, all released between May 8th and May 20th, all competitive with Western frontier models, and all running inference at less than 1/3 the price of Claude Opus. The United States spent years building the most aggressive technology export controls in modern history, billions of dollars in restricted chip sales, entire GPU architectures banned from Chinese data centers. And now, 4 labs just answered the $50 billion question. Did any of it actually work? Quick context. Starting in October 2022, the US banned China from buying advanced AI chips. NVIDIA's A100 and H100 banned. Advanced lithography equipment banned. Every time a loophole appeared, Washington closed it. The goal was simple: slow China's AI development by starving them of compute. And for about 2 years, it looked like it was working. Then, DeepSeek happened. In January 2025, DeepSeek V3 dropped, trained on older, restricted chips, matched GPT-4 on most benchmarks, cost a fraction of what OpenAI spent. NVIDIA's stock dropped $500 billion in a single day. That was the first crack. What just happened in May 2026 is the wall coming down. First up, GLM 5.1 from Jipu AI, also known as Z.AI, released May 8th. On key coding benchmarks, it beat Claude Opus 4.6, not tied, beat, a Chinese model running on restricted hardware, outperforming one of the most capable Western models on the planet. Next, MiniMax M2.7, released May 12th. Full multimodal support with agentic coding capabilities, competitive across reasoning, code generation, and tool use. And the API pricing? Roughly a quarter of what you'd pay for equivalent Western models. Kimi K2.6 from Moonshot AI, released May 16th. And this is the one that turned heads. It became the first open-weight model to beat GPT 5.4 on SWE-Bench Pro, the industry benchmark for real-world software engineering. Not a toy benchmark, not a cherry-picked eval. The benchmark that measures whether an AI can actually fix real bugs in real code bases. And finally, DeepSeek V4, May 20th. The sequel to the model that crashed NVIDIA's stock. Improved across every dimension. Competitive with GPT 5.4 on agentic benchmarks. Open weight. And the API pricing is so low it's practically a rounding error compared to frontier Western models. Now here's what nobody's saying out loud. 4 frontier models from 4 separate Chinese labs released in 12 days. May 8th, 12th, 16th, 20th. Almost perfectly spaced. Security researchers and policy analysts are interpreting this as a coordinated signal, not to each other, but to Washington. The message is clear. Your chip bans created an inconvenience, not a barrier. Let's talk about what this means for developers. All 4 models run inference at under 1/3 the price of comparable Western models. If you're building an AI application today, you now have frontier-class coding models available at a fraction of the cost. Same benchmark performance, same capability class, 1/3 the price. That's not a minor difference, that's a business model threat. And several of these models are open weight. You can download Kimi K2.6. You can download DeepSeek V4. Run them on your own hardware. Fine-tune them. No API dependency. No vendor lock-in. Meanwhile, the 2 most capable Western models are closed source, API only, and increasingly expensive. The irony of US export controls pushing Chinese labs toward open source dominance is not great. The obvious question: how? Without access to the latest NVIDIA GPUs, how are Chinese labs matching frontier performance? 3 factors. First, algorithmic efficiency. DeepSeek pioneered mixture of experts architectures that get more performance per flop. Second, training data curation. Better data beats more compute, and Chinese labs have invested heavily in data quality. Third, they're using older chips more efficiently than anyone thought possible. Before the bans tightened, Chinese companies stockpiled chips. Huawei developed its own Ascend series as an alternative, and labs have gotten creative with interconnects and parallelism, linking thousands of less powerful chips to match what a few hundred H100s could do. It's more expensive per flop, but when you're spending government-backed billions, the math still works. The original goal of chip export controls was to create a 2 to 3 year capability gap between Chinese and Western AI labs. In May 2026, that gap is effectively 0 for coding and agentic tasks. 4 models, 12 days. Competitive with or beating the best Western models. By the government's own metric, the policy has failed at its primary objective. To be fair, defenders of the policy argue it did slow China down. Training costs were higher, scaling is harder without cutting-edge chips, And on certain frontier capabilities like reasoning at the absolute bleeding edge, Western models may still lead. But the counterargument writes itself. If the goal was a multi-year gap, and you got zero gap in coding benchmarks, the cost-benefit ratio of the entire sanctions regime is in question. For developers, this is actually good news, regardless of the geopolitics. More competition means lower prices. Open-weight models mean less vendor lock-in. And if you're building an agentic coding tool, you now have 4 more frontier-class options that didn't exist 2 weeks ago. Competition in AI infrastructure is the one thing that benefits everyone building on top of it. But there's a catch. Open weights don't mean open training. You can inspect the model architecture, but you can't verify what data it was trained on, whether it has hidden behaviors, or what safety testing was actually done. Running a foreign government-adjacent model on your production infrastructure is a decision that deserves more thought than just comparing benchmark scores. What's most significant isn't any individual model, it's the pace. In 2024, China had 1 frontier competitive lab. In 2025, 2. In May 2026, 4 labs dropped frontier models in 12 days. The capability curve isn't just closing, it's accelerating, and there's no indication it's going to slow down. We're entering a multipolar AI world. The assumption that frontier AI capability would remain concentrated in 3 or 4 Western companies is gone. Chinese labs are at parity. European sovereign AI initiatives are scaling. Gulf states are funding their own labs. The era of American AI monopoly lasted about 3 years, and it's over. And here's the wild card nobody in Washington planned for. By pushing Chinese labs away from commercial chip sales, the export controls accidentally incentivize them to go open source. Open-weight models attract global contributors, build ecosystems, and become infrastructure. DeepSeek V4 is already being fine-tuned by thousands of developers worldwide. You can't export control an open-source model. 2 scenarios from here. Scenario A, a global price war drives AI costs down for everyone. Open-weight models become the default. Developers win. Scenario B, geopolitical fragmentation creates separate AI ecosystems. Chinese models banned in the West. Western models locked out of China. Developers lose. The next 12 months will determine which future we get. 4 frontier models, 12 days, 1/3 the price. The AI landscape just changed permanently. Drop a comment. Would you run a Chinese open source model in your production stack? I want to hear your reasoning. The AI arms race just went from a sprint to a full-on brawl. Subscribe and hit the bell. We cover the stories that actually matter for developers, not the hype, the real shifts.